Tuning has always been the heart and soul of racing games, right? I mean, who doesn't remember decking out their ride in Need for Speed Most Wanted, slapping on the best upgrades and feeling invincible? Good times! Each and every car-focused game provides a way to modernize and improve your vehicle, but none does it as great as BeamNG. Before we dive into all those juicy tuning tips, let's clear something up. BeamNG is all about physics, not just driving. If you feel like I am wrong, feel free to comment. I am always open for good discussion. This guide will help you tune your car for racing. In future, I am planning on making similar videos about other driving styles and one about UI apps. For this video, I will be using controller. Still, remember that wheel is always superior choice, even if a little pricey, especially for racing. So without further ado, let's start by choosing a car. Ideally, you want to take a race version, just to simplify some parts. And after you have found a variant that you like, test drive. Remember that before tuning, it's mandatory to check for possible problems. Something that you doesn't like in handling of car that you picked. I will be using ETK K series, sport modification of course. Alright, time to take it for a spin on automation test track. Specifically, time trial race track circuit. It's perfect for shaking out those tuning cobwebs. As you do a few tries, you'll start noticing what's a little off with the stock setup. Don't worry, we'll fix it soon enough. Oh, and if you don't understand how to clear turns perfectly, I suggest you go watch some of the runs of speedrunners. I will leave a link to the 2 pixels run in description and also a link to Hyku's replay using same car as I do. Both show great map clear. So let's get to the problems of this particular vehicle. As expected from pre-built car, it is over and understeer, tight and very much stiff. Let me explain. This car doesn't turn very well, even if I push to the maximum. Yet, when I hold the gas, it can go spinning. Vehicle is really tight, and it's visible after each turn. We simply losing too much speed. And finally, suspension movement is almost non-existent, which leads to car being stiff, leading to bounces on almost any bumps. This all is unacceptable. So let's start from the basics. Differentials. Mainly power lock rate, coast lock rate and preload torque. The main issue with tuning in BeamNG is that most of players doesn't really know what does what. So I will try to explain it as simply as humanly possible. Following this idea, I will start with power and coast lock rates. Both control how much the wheels follow the road. A lower lock rate means the road has more control over the wheels, while higher lock rate gives the wheels more independence from the road. Now let's go into specifics. Think of the power lock rate like a teamwork between your wheels during acceleration. A lower rate lets each wheel do its own thing, which helps your car turn better, because the outside wheel gets more power. But if one wheel loses grip, a limited slip differential steps in like a coach, stopping all the power from going to the struggling player. Now, a higher lock rate is like forcing the wheels to work together more, which can make tight turns harder, but keeps power balanced when one starts slipping. On the other hand, coast lock rate controls how much torque is applied to the wheels during deceleration or engine braking. It might seem logical to set power and coast lock rates the same since the tires don't change, but the car is in different dynamic balance depending on whether you're accelerating or braking. Also, unlike acceleration, where weight shifts to the rear, braking shifts weight to the front, reducing rear grip. A low coast lock lets the driven wheels rotate freely, leaving the front wheel to handle most of the turning. Increasing coast lock applies more even torque to both wheels during engine braking, helping with stability and turning. However, too much coast lock can cause the inside wheel to slip, leading to both wheels losing traction. Tuning rear-wheel drive is the easiest, but things get more complicated with all-wheel drive. For rear-wheel drive, I usually start with a preload torque of around 80, which sounds fancy, but really just means the rear wheel get a solid grip. Power lock 30-40%, coast lock 15-25%. It's like dialing in the sweet spot so your car doesn't start breakdancing when you least expect it. This setup typically gives about 2/3 or 3/4 of engine torque for power and around 1/3 or half for coast. You can adjust these values based on your engine's power. For more powerful engines, increase the power lock and lower the coast lock to stay within the tire's grip. For front-wheel drive, use a lower preload torque of around 30-50 with a power lock of 35-45 and a coast lock of 20-30%. For all-wheel drive, start by choosing a race AWD transfer case if possible. Adjust the torque split based on the car's weight distribution. A front-engine car will have more torque to the front wheels. A mid-engine car will have an even split, and a rear-engine car will be rear-biased. Set the preload low, around 10-20, with a power lock of 25-35% and a coast lock of 0-10%. Then tune the front differentials with low preload and power and coast settings, typically around 30-50 for preload, 15-25% for power lock and 5-10% for coast lock. For the rear differential, tune it like you would for rear-wheel drive car. That's a lot to take in, I know. Grab a drink, take a breath, and let's move on to alignment. It's one of the most important parts of tuning car. I will try to go for more generic setup. It consists of toe, camber and caster. Toe changes the angle of the wheels. Without it, the wheels roll straight without slipping, which lowers resistance, but can make the car feel less stable. Toe out helps the front tires grip better in turns by changing the angle of the inside and outside wheel. Toe in makes the car more stable and responsive, especially in the rear, but reduces how much the car rotates in corners. Basically, understeering. Toe out increases corner rotation, which means oversteering, but also can reduce steering response. Camber is like how much stance the car has. A negative value angles the bottom of the wheels outward and the top inward. More negative camber improves grip in corners, but reduces straight line stability. Camber also changes with suspension movement. When the springs compress, camber becomes more negative. Caster is the angle of suspension towards or away from the center of the car. Positive caster tilts the suspension backward, putting the wheels further forward than the top of suspension. Increasing caster helps the car handle better under braking by aligning the suspension with the forces it experiences. Time to set up. For a baseline alignment, just remove all caster, because it can affect too many things. I will set to 0%, but if you find yourself in need of a grip when turning in, add that up to 5% caster, but never more than that. For camber, start by looking at the car in chase cam to see how much the wheels are angled. I often raise the suspension, then adjust camber, as the right height affects it. Generally, the front suspension has less camber than the rear. Depending on the car's weight distribution, for a front engine car, you might use less camber up front compared to a rear engine car. I begin by adjusting it visually, and then fine-tuning comes later. For toe, if you want a stable, predictable car, go with positive toe in the front and rear, around 5-15%. For a more aggressive setup, use a bit of negative toe in the front, about -5 to -10%, to improve turning under braking, though it will be less stable in a straight line. For front-wheel drive cars, a little negative toe in the rear, about -5 to -10% is usually preferred. Alright, now that we've tweaked a few settings, let's take this beast for a spin. Heads up, things might feel a little bit off at first. The car could be acting strange, maybe not settling into turns like you'd hope, or feeling like it's skating on ice. That's totally normal. It just means we need to fine-tune the grip and handling. Let's dive in and make it stick to the track. Most of the time with the default tuning, the suspension is too stiff for the car's weight. If the car is stationary and the suspension is fully extended, the inside wheel won't keep contact with the ground when the outside suspension is loaded. This usually causes the shakiness when turning. Let's dive into the relationship between springs and dampers. They are like the dynamic duo behind how stiff or smooth your ride feels. Both affect the stiffness of the car, but in different ways. Springs adjust stiffness based on how much they are compressed. This is a linear relationship between compression and force. Dampers are like shock absorbers for your springs, controlling how fast they move when you hit bumps. If they are too stiff, your car might feel stable at first, but it's like riding a pogo stick. Any bump and you can lose your grip. Well, now you're probably wondering, why is it even matters? It's really easy to mess up with those and make car handle worse if you only adjust one without understanding how they work together. Remember that if you want a stiffer ride, you can increase the spring rate or the bump damping rate, and both will feel stiffer. Let's go over the basics of how dampers work in real-world conditions. Imagine a spring with no damping. In perfect conditions, no air resistance, friction or heat loss. It would keep bouncing back and forth forever when released from a compressed position. Obviously, we don't want that in a car. Introducing damping reduces this bouncing, so the spring eventually returns to its neutral position. A damping ratio of 1, meaning it returns to neutral as fast as possible without overshooting. It's easy to overdump your suspension, which might feel stable at first, but reduces grip and can become unstable over bumps. I like to start with an underdamped suspension and slowly tune it up until it's critically damped. If there is a lot of downforce, I keep it critically damped. Otherwise, I dial it back a little to around 0.4 damping ratio for a smoother ride. Now that we understand the suspension basics, let's work on fine-tuning it. As mentioned earlier, default tune is likely too stiff, so the first step is to increase the ride height a bit and lower the spring rate. You want more travel in the suspension when it extends, rather than compresses. Make sure to adjust the front and rear suspension evenly. I usually raise the ride height and lower the spring rate until the wheel gap between the tire and fender looks the same as before. It's pretty easy to check how the car handles. Just drop it from a bit of height. If the suspension bottoms out or hits too hard, lower the height and repeat. Time to check how the suspension holds up. Watch the car closely. If it slams down too hard when you hit a bump, crank up the bump damping. If it's bouncing back like a trampoline, tighten up the rebound damping. On the flip side, if it feels like the suspension barely moves, dial down the bump damping. And if it's taking forever to settle after bump, give that rebound damping a little tweak. Remember that when tuning your suspension while the car is stationary, the front and rear compresses and rebound at the same rate. But when you're driving and go over a bump, if both the front and rear react at the same rate, it can make the car feel unsettled after bump. This happens because the rear suspension hits the bump after the front, causing the compression and rebound of each to be out of sync. Since they have same frequency, they will also return to neutral out of sync. To fix this, you want to make sure the rear suspension returns to normal faster, so that both the front and rear are in sync. You can do this by decreasing the rebound rate of the rear suspension or increasing the rebound rate of the front. Alright, we've tweaked enough numbers. Time to see if all these changes actually make a difference on the track. Let's take it out for a test run and see if this beast can handle the heat. Let's get back to automation test track. Do at least 3 laps to get a feel for how the car handles. Drive it slow at first and work your way up to its limits. If you crash early, don't blame the car. Learn to separate your mistakes from the car's issues. This is a key. Break down the track and focus on one problem at a time. What's going wrong? Where is it happening? Is it during braking, turning, or the apex? Figure out if it's something you're doing or if the car needs adjustments. Now that we've covered the base aspects of tuning, let's dive into 2 more crucial parts: ride height and tire pressure, and how they affect your car's handling. Ride height plays a critical role in determining how much body roll the car experiences during turns. A higher ride height, for instance, will make the car more prone to rolling over due to a higher center of gravity. To counteract this, softer anti-roll bars will provide a bit more control, but the car will still have a tendency to roll more than a car with a lower ride height. On the flip side, a lower ride height allows the car to perform better with the stiffer anti-roll bars, which will result in less body roll and faster response to driver inputs. Tire pressure are relatively straightforward to tune in BeamNG, since the game doesn't feature dynamic tires, meaning they don't change temperature or pressure. as they would in real life. They consistently operate at optimal temperature and friction level, so you don't need to worry too much about tire wear or heat management. As a general rule, I set tire pressure between 20 and 30 psi. Wider, thicker tires tend to perform better at the lower end of this range, while skinnier, thinner tires respond better at the higher end. And there you have it, you're on your way to create the perfect ride. Remember, it's all about practice, experimentation, and finding what works for you. So get out there, tune your car, and start breaking some records, or at least some bumpers. Remember, tuning is all about optimization and finding a balance. If your car sticks to the turns, but behind on straights, it's because the elements that aid in tuning might limit your top speed. In the end, it's all about adapting, improving, and, most importantly, having fun. Thank you for watching, hope this one helps, don't forget to subscribe, and I hope to see you next time.